Hello there, I am Samantha Herbst, writer, journalist, podcaster, and co-host of the Great Equalizer podcast and its sister subsidiary, TGE's Current Read. Today, I have the great pleasure of welcoming on board author Cecelia Ahern. Arguably one of the most prolific writers of our time, Cecelia wrote her first sensational novel, P.S. I Love You, when she was just 21 years old. This was swiftly followed by Rainbow's End, which, like P.S. I Love You, was adapted to film. Cecelia has written a novel every year since, with her bibliography now officially totaling 19 novels and counting. These books have sold more than 25 million copies worldwide and have been published in 40 countries and 30 or so languages. Sometime last year, I had the pleasure of reading Cecelia's latest published installment, In 1,000 Different Ways, and she joins me now to chat about her career, as well as this phenomenal book, possibly also giving us a sneak peek into what's next on the horizon for fans. Welcome, Cecelia.
Thank you so much. That was a lovely, lovely welcome.
Gosh, it is indeed an absolute pleasure to be chatting with you today. I feel like the start of your career was a seminal moment for so many women and people, I suppose, who are around my age and age adjacent. We are so familiar with the story of P.S. I Love You, the story and the characters, and this year officially spans 2 decades of your career, correct? Happy anniversary of P.S. I Love You, officially.
Thank you. Yeah, I can't believe it's 20 years.
20
it's just
years.
Crazy.
That's my whole young adulthood and into later adulthood. And there's a big chunk of readers like myself who have grown up with you, and it's been an absolute privilege.
Oh, thank you. I feel old.
I feel old, but you know what? I also feel warm and fuzzy because your books give just that. There's a special Cecelia Ahern kind of trademark where you really go into the raw and the nitty-gritty of things. You're not shy to veer in a dark direction and to go into the difficult spaces. But there is always a glimmer of hope and light and love where you showcase the beauty of life. And you don't leave us as readers kind of in the doldrums. If I can wax lyrical more about P.S. I Love You, I was listening to your interview with Ryan Tubridy from the Bookshelf podcast.
Oh, yes, yeah.
And he had you pick out 3 books, a book from your childhood, a book that made you cry, and a book that changed your life. And you chose P.S. I Love You as the book that changed your life. I wanted to let you know on hearing that I can safely say that P.S. I Love You is a story that made me cry. Every time I delve into the book, I went there again this week. I was like, oh, Sam, why? It's been such an emotional roller coaster of a week as a result. And I watched the movie, and I'm not a crier. I do not consider myself to be a crier, but from beginning to end, that book gets me. It's just so incredibly moving. And no doubt several of your books have marked many readers' young adulthood, made them cry, changed their lives simultaneously. So,
wow. Thank you.
I had to get it out there. It took like probably a good 5 minutes for me to just...
No, that was beautiful. I mean, you said it better than I could. I mean, that's amazing for me to hear. And, I'm incredibly lucky to be able to write stories and receive feedback like that. It's encouraging to me. When I wrote P.S. I Love You, I had no idea that I would be reaching people all around the world. I wrote it for myself, and I wrote it because I had this overwhelming desire to write the story that was in my head. And I was so filled with emotions, and I put all of those emotions into the story. And that seems to be the magic of books, what the author puts in. Hopefully, most of the time, if you get it right, the reader gets it back. And it is an incredibly emotional story, and it was an emotional time in my life. But very important to write it in the way that you said, that I want to structure my stories going from dark to light, because I might play around with the opposite, and that that would be the exception. But it's important for me to close the book a reader feeling, and not just the reader, but me as the writer feeling that, that lovely kind of uplifted feeling, having been through the ringer, having been through something very emotional and challenging.
It's a reward for your readers, and I'll tell you, I'm amazed. I mean, I'm sure that people have harped on about the age you were when you started your writing career. A lot of writers start out much later, having gained life experience, and there's really something to say about a writer who can tap into very adult emotions in a way that doesn't feel juvenile at all. So, and I think you've just grown, no doubt, in your writing capability and in your ability to delve into those emotions, and which I really think ties in really nicely with In a Thousand Different Ways, which we will be chatting about today. I do want to say, though, that this is obviously a first for me chatting with you, a first for me in The Great Equalizer, but the second time that you've graced the airwaves of Jonathan Ball's Pagecast podcast. I'm sure that we can link listeners up to that discussion. It was about Freckles, your book preceding In a Thousand Different Ways. But like I mentioned, we are going to be chatting about this today mostly. It was one of my top reads of 2023, and a recommendation that I put out, not lightly, to people who are feeling their emotions, being in their feels, like we like to say. And I've even read a ton of people who are like, that they've been in a reading slump, and that this has taken them out of their reading slump. So
that's the highest compliment that can be paid. I love that.
Well, definitely, if you are in a reading slump, In a Thousand Different Ways is one way to get you out of that. It is a recommendation I also make for people who love, people I know who love domestic fiction, but there's a hint of magic realism. Is that an accurate genre characterization of In a Thousand Different Ways?
Yes, like it's not straightforward magic, like I suppose magic realism, as you say. It's and it's not as much as I've done in other novels where it is, there's the invisible friend, or is there, In a Thousand, and can't remember the name of my own books now. If You Could See Me Now, there was an invisible friend, and A Place Called Here, there was an imaginary place. It's not in that world. Like it's very much grounded, and there are people out there in the world who do see people's auras. So I don't think I'm quite going into magic, but I have definitely exaggerated, and it's even more heightened than usual. Like the colors have character, and the colors have movement. So yeah, it is more. It's more unique, but not quite magical. It's not like a fantasy novel or anything but there is something more exaggerated than the usual aura seer.
For those who have yet to dive into In a Thousand Different Ways, have no idea what it's about, give us the elevator pitch. What is this book about?
So it's about a character named Alice who has the ability to see people's emotions in the form of colours around their bodies. And just by looking at someone, she can know exactly how they feel. Each colour represents an emotion or mood, and if the colour travels to her and touches her, then she can feel exactly how someone is feeling. So it's really about being highly empathetic, someone who can go through life knowing exactly how everyone else is feeling, but like not necessarily wanting to either. And she has to try and navigate life, find her own path in life without being kind of, I suppose, knocked off course and feeling the stuff of everybody else around her. And it's a difficult journey because she tries to isolate herself because she doesn't want to be around people. It's all too much. But she has to find that happy balance of being able to live for her and, have relationships with people without getting too involved in their problems.
So you've said in many an interview that you first realized the concept of a novel, right? And then you begin to flesh out your characters, or your characters speak to you and they come out, you wait as they kind of come to you, like really, and that's the magic of writing and tapping into your kind of authordom. I think you mentioned being either pregnant or newly postpartum with your third child when you were writing or conceptualizing In a Thousand Different Ways. So how did Alice come to the page exactly?
Yeah, I had the idea many years earlier, but I just didn't know, like, someone who sees colours. Yeah, so what? I couldn't figure out how I was going to tell that story or who she was or what her problem was. And there are moments in my life that I am highly sensitive. I am an empathetic person, but there are moments in my life where I feel it's too much. You're like too in tune with what people feel that it kind of starts to pass onto your side. It's like it crosses the boundary into you and starts to affect you. And so after having my third baby, I think it was like hormonal. I was feeling more.
Yeah.
It was also during the pandemic, when we were locked down, and I think it was particularly long, horrible, grey January that felt like it was going on forever. And I just felt I was just feeling so much, and I was like, well, there you go. That's she just came to life in that time, and she's not me. So I know it sounds like I'm kind of putting myself, but I took my feelings and gave them to her, and heightened everything, exaggerated them, and created, I think, a new language. I wanted to talk about, write about what it's like to. People are talking all the time. There's so much noise in the world. Everyone's got something to say, but we can communicate with each other in other ways, like watching each other's body language, listening to the pauses and the silences, looking at facial expressions. For her, it's in the colors. That's how she reads and understands people. But I just found that there were a lot of other themes in the novel that I could introduce through this.
And how apt for it to have come out when it did in this post-pandemic world where I think things did start to feel quite heavy for a lot of people. We were essentially in this locked up frame of mind, if not physically totally locked up and locked in our houses. And I can relate because I was also pregnant and had my second child in that year, in 2020. And that feeling, and then also you mention, I can't remember whether it's an outright thing in the book, but Alice experiences headaches and wears glasses because it is so overwhelming. And when I read about you being postpartum while writing this and feeling, it's not just feeling those feelings. It's when you mention this synaesthesia that she experiences, like when you're newly pregnant, your hormones cause a metallic taste in your mouth. Right. And
I forgot to mention that. I mean, that was quite personal for me. Like, so when I was pregnant, I got these aura migraines.
Yes.
Which I've never even heard of them before. I didn't know what was happening. I thought I was having a stroke actually, because they have stroke-like symptoms. And, I couldn't get my sentences out. Everything was jumbled and garbled, and I was seeing this light. And then I went to a neurologist, to talk about it, to see if it was pregnancy and if it was anything else. And he explained it all to me, which I thought was fascinating. The things that the human body and mind can do, that sounds magic. It sounds magic. It sounds made up, but it's not. It's an actual real thing. So that kind of gave me encouragement as well to write the story. Because I didn't want to write anything too much out there. I always want people to be able to relate. So as soon as I started hearing about the actual things that people experience, like, I can't say the word synaesthesia. I always get it wrong.
Synaesthesia, yeah.
I can't do it. So that word and the aura migraines, and just seeing that there is, like, it's possible. It's possible for this to happen to my character for a variety of reasons.
And you kind of don't think that it is possible, especially if you're a very logical, kind of right-minded A-type person who does things by the book, and you do have your more spiritually inclined people, but there's something about motherhood and the magic in that, and something about what happens to your body and the unknowns of pregnancy that I really related to and could latch onto with Alice's experience of there is science to it, and you so beautifully balance. You keep a balance between going whole hog magic realism and fantasy, or whole hog fantasy, I suppose, but then also exploring the science behind synaesthesia. Yeah. And at one point, Alice's brother Hugh, his girlfriend at the time, opens up is it a textbook, or she Googles, and there's explanation for what Alice is experiencing. And finally, there are people out there who believe her, and you're able to put a word to exactly what's happening to her. So there really is a great balance between this weird otherworldly sensation, which is very much akin to those aura headaches, like what you experienced, and the reality of her feeling and absorbing other people's feelings, right?
Yeah. It's important to me, no matter what I write, to ground it in reality, even if it doesn't feel real, And I am, even though when I write, I'm appealing to myself and not the reader, quite selfishly. I do think this has got to be credible. I don't want people reading this going, "What is she doing now? Like this isn't possible." So I looked at all the scientific and medical reasons for how it could work, and even though none of them are actually, she's never diagnosed with anything that I write about. I just explore it as options. Like this could be why, this could be why. But deep down in I think my rationale for how it has occurred to her. I can't even speak English. My my reasoning for how this happened is from how she was raised. I think it was a survival thing, that she's been, living with a mother who has bipolar, and from a young age, watching her mother, like she's on tiptoes almost, on tenterhooks, not realizing which mother is going to walk in today. Is it going to be this aggressive, angry mother, this hyper mother, or is it going to be the calm, loving mother that is also there? And so it's like she's walking on eggshells around her own home, trying to figure out which version of her mother is coming. And because she observes her so much and her moods, to me, that's where I think that this kind of skill develops, is by being so in tune to her mother and every movement, every facial expression, everything, that's where the skill arrives to understanding how all people feel. However, that's not enough for everyone else. So I did want to offer all the other medical reasons, but I do think the environment that you grow up in very much, creates you, and so that's, for Alice, that's where she came from. But also the name Alice came from.
Yes, I was going to ask you about this.
Yeah, from
Lewis Carroll. But
Lewis
why?
Carroll.
But why?
Because the neurologist told me in that meeting that Lewis Carroll also had aura migraines, and that is what he was when he wrote Alice in Wonderland. That is very much his experience. The idea of the Mad Hatter who's speaking in all this garbled way is exactly what happened to me when I had these episodes. He can't make sense of anything. The things being feeling far away, trying to reach for things that are too far. Her, Alice becoming small and big and small and big. All of that happens. And I've always loved that book. Always loved that book. My bathroom has Alice in Wonderland wallpaper.
Really?
That's how much I love it. I mean, I've always loved it. I've loved it more as an older person than as a child, because I feel like I'm constantly trying to make sense of it. And then I just felt so much of a connection. Then when he told me that, I was like, wow, that is the experience. So I decided to name her Alice.
It's like a secret power you and Lewis Carroll share from this, and very similar to what Alice experiences. She kind of has a secret power in that she never really. There's a point in the book where she realizes that socially she hasn't been able to kind of read people in the way that quote unquote normal people would read others. And that's a real empath experience where you're observing, and she's had to, it's a trauma response or a survival technique that she had to read her mother from early on. And in that way, you've given her the synaesthesia to read her mother, to start reading people. And there's like a parallel to that, I feel, in that the awful experience of getting aura migraines is also like, it's something you and this amazing writer, and you are an amazing writer, have in common. That maybe that's your silver bullet is the fact that you experience this. And
I appreciate. I mean, it's funny because in the novel she has, a friend called Gospel.
Yes.
And they're, they go to the same school together. And because Alice has a lot of difficulties trying to deal with these feelings, taking on other people's feelings, they send her to a school for kids with behavioral issues. She needs to learn the tools to deal with who she is. And Gospel, who loves comic books, says to her, you are like a superhero, and this is your skill, understanding how people feel, kind of understanding how they feel without people even really truly knowing themselves how they feel. This is the deep, deep down inside stuff. And he says to her, but every superhero has a nemesis. And if you, know exactly, or if you're drawn to people and know exactly how they feel all the time, then your nemesis is someone who is numb and doesn't feel at all, and the very opposite. And as she goes, through the book, she realizes that she herself is her own nemesis. Like when she's trying to shield herself from everybody else so that she doesn't feel anything at all, she realizes that she has become her own nemesis. There's the numb her, and then there's the very open, understanding her. And I think that's what we are, all of us, whether we're superheroes or not. We can be our own worst enemy. So
I really do see in 1,000 different ways as a Bildungsroman. You meet Alice at 8. You're very much, and I think that's the way you write as well, that you're all encompassing in a character. You sit down and you just take on their thoughts, feelings, emotions, vocabulary, and the reader grows as Alice grows. And I don't want to spoil the ending, but you do meet Alice later in life as well. As I said,
I mean, it's a lifetime. It's
yes.
A lifetime told in emotions, and I think that's, have your tissues ready.
Have your tissues ready, and it's also you do so well to show how a character journeys, but doesn't have it all figured out. Because does anyone ever have life figured out? But you show how, okay, she's overcome certain things, and she's learned about herself being that arch nemesis, and she's gone to the ways of trying and learning to / trying to control her synaesthesia and her experiences, and how that's both a good and a bad thing. And in the same way, I really just liken it all the time to just being an empath, and you're giving it a face, a physical face, because being an empath is largely an internal thing, but to try and explain it in a way that people who maybe don't understand can see, that's what this book does. You've captured the growth of Alice so well and explored the many different facets, both good and bad, of empathy. And you said something in another interview that I can't recall, but it was something to do with how empathy does not equate to compassion or compassionate actions. And that's also just one, because she wasn't a helper, right? She didn't go out and become like this amazing MD who heals people. That wasn't her. So, but
there were two ways, exactly. I mean, there were two ways I could have written this story, and one is that she has this skill and she uses it as a superpower, and she goes out and she helps people. And I just felt like, well, that's really obvious. That's not the story I want to tell. She's struggling with this, and she and that's it. Empathy doesn't equal compassion, because you can feel what everybody else is feeling around you, but not do anything about it. It takes something else to go out and help people. So, yeah, and again, I was aware that not everybody's empathetic, and people, and sometimes being called sensitive is an insult. Why are you so sensitive is kind of thrown at people like an insult. So I wanted to show it's very difficult to write about empathy, but color is a perfect example, because if it goes so basic as someone is angry and there's a red mist around them and they're shouting at you, that red mist travels in the air to the next person, and suddenly you have transferred it to them. You have given your anger to somebody else. And I just think that so many people aren't aware of that. They're not aware of how their own actions affect other people. And for many people, like, we even look at her brothers in her own house. For her brother, her older brother Hugh, the colors travel over his head. Everything just seems to go right over him. He manages to not be affected by it. For Alice, she's ducking and diving. She's trying to avoid all these colors as they come flying at her. And then for her little brother, Ollie, he absorbs everything. So for people who aren't empathetic, for people who might be feisty or whatever, share their emotions, and it's just they're not aware of how other people can just absorb it and suddenly become that emotion. And I just wanted to use the color to show how it travels.
And you do so well, because it's not just Alice. Alice is witnessing it, and you're writing that down. And as in the narration, it's okay. This is what happens to those feelings and that, but very accurately in my mind, also just exploring the different ways, as you've said, of how people absorb different energies. Because everything in life, that there's sometimes a person that will walk into a room that just changes the whole energy of a room, whether good or bad. And this is just adding something visual to it that gives it that added meaning. It's so clever. It's really a clever concept.
I think people who aren't even into all that energy stuff, because it's like they think it's airy-fairy, would all agree on that. Someone walks into a room and the energy in a room can change. Or you meet someone and they can make you feel so happy and like they fill you with joy. Or you can meet someone else and barely say 2 words to them and feel like you just don't like each other. You know, that it's something that clashes between. So we know about energies, you know, like that's a basic level. So I think it's just heightened then from there.
And also a woman's innate ability, which you explore once or twice in the novel, but in quite poignant moments, a woman's ability to know when she's in danger, that gut feel. Alice sees it, and Alice has learned to look for it, and she knows when to get the hell out of a space. But so do you and I. And there's so much, that we can relate to as women in knowing, okay, this is not a savory situation. I'm gonna get the hell out of here. But I'm not seeing it in color. I
think that's important to listen to as well. That kind of gut feeling. We do feel it. I actually just got goosebumps when you said that. But anyway, so like, sometimes you're in the company of someone, you're like, no, you're not. You're not safe with this person. You've got to trust that and leave it. So in this, I wanted to show that in the form of color. There's a character who's just, there's like an oil spill behind him. It's just black darkness, oil, filling the space around him. It's thick, it's gloopy, it's trying to take everything in around it and suffocate it. So she feels the kind of coldness of certain people and the danger of certain people and the darkness and the confusion. And I think at one stage she describes it as, I should know because I wrote it, but it's like being surrounded by a lot of, radio, or how did I explain it? Like a lot of frequencies around her. She's kind of coming in and out of tune with all the people around her. It feels like, a lot of stuff going around her.
And you know how this feels, especially if you're a more sensitive person or an introvert. I like that, what you described there, just being in a room and everything is just noisy, even if it is quiet, or being in a situation and feeling that overwhelm. That's so nicely put, because I think it all meshes into itself. And, for those who are more visually inclined, I really love the way you've structured the book. It's so organized, and it just speaks to my A-type heart.
I like that's a lovely compliment. Thank you. Organized. I love it.
There's blue, there's rust. I might be missing out. Blue, rust, green, rose gold. Different facets of your life that you've given color to. It just the levels of how you made use of color and given color a personality really extends way beyond how we know and understand color. So
I love that you missed the last color, by the way.
What? Oh, did I miss the last color? Rose gold.
Was it white?
White. How did I miss that? White.
I think it was white.
I'm gonna have to go look. Well, you're the author, so you would know. I missed that.
I've made up a lot of it. There's obviously, if you even go online and you look up colors, there's kind of a different
take.
A different take from everyone. Like red is anger, but yes, red is passion. So I realized then that I researched a lot of kind of aura books, and everything was different. Yeah, it is white.
It is white. I just looked it up, everybody. I did.
But I thought you were deliberately not saying it because you didn't want to go. So I just kind of realized I had to create my own palette, my own language then, and then what happened was, if anything was like not luminous, metallic. Metallic was kind of danger, it was sarcastic or bitter or something a bit untrustworthy about metallic. So I had so much fun. I had to remember by the end of it, like I had to try and keep a log of all the colors I'd mentioned, because I think
I love that. And black is always sticky and tar-like, and Gospel has an orange that is surprisingly thick and vicious, almost viscous.
Yeah. There's the different shades between the colors. So there's there's a but he's honey, so it's nice. Like there's the various.
Yes.
Yeah, there was so much in it. I had to mention it.
I loved it. The palette that you've used throughout the book, the way that you've described it. So in 1,000 different ways, for anyone listening, tuning in, go and get it. You can get it at all of the best bookshops. I thoroughly enjoyed it. And I would regret not bringing up Raw because it is one of my favorites of what you've done. So you mentioned when we spoke about now in 1,000 different ways. You mentioned wanting it to be rooted in realism. And there is a lot of relatability and that is just so aptly put. But these stories, so Raw is a collection of short stories showcasing different facets, I suppose, of womanhood. It's been made into an Apple, it's been adapted for TV by Apple, where some of the stories have been put with some really amazing big-named actors. Issa Rae, Nicole Kidman, Brie Larson. Oh, man, that must have looked like a dream come true. If Hilary Swank and Gerard Butler wasn't a dream come true, then from P.S. I Love You. The cast of Raw, I mean, so, okay, I have to ask what the genesis of this book is, because as I've mentioned, I'm also a mom, and I think there was no greater catalyst for the feminist in me than having my babies, my boys, because you really start to think about the world that you bring them up into. And there are stories in here that even if there's no babies or motherhood involved, just speak to that experience, but they are so eclectic and weird.
It's so weird.
So where were you, Cecelia? What were you thinking? Where was your mind at when Raw took up shape in your brain?
I would say that Raw is my brain. Like that is the way my mind thinks. And I really try to become a bit more normal when I'm writing novels and rein it in. But if I had my way, I mean, everything would be like Raw. But it's not for everyone. It's a surreal collection of stories. And the very first one I wrote was The Woman Who Slowly Disappeared. And that was kind of inspired by a meeting I had with a casting agent in LA. I was introducing her to a friend, and she started telling me why my stories were popular and why they were being adapted. And she started getting into the whole advertising part that she's talking about. We like to write about we want 30-year-old characters because we want the advertising to attract it, and blah blah blah. It went into this very uncreative conversation, and she stopped at women at 55. She was talking about age ranges, and I was like, what about the 55 plus? She goes, oh no, we don't have a category for over 55. And I just thought that kind of, not only do women feel like they're not represented over a certain age, you don't feel like they see themselves, they feel like they're fading away, that society doesn't see them. I was just hearing it in a meeting. There wasn't even a genre, there wasn't even a category, which I know has changed now. But women over 55 weren't being considered. And the first thing I wanted to do was I went and I wrote a story called Old, about everyone that was in their 70s, because I didn't want to feed into the fact that I was writing all these 30-year-old women. And I wanted to represent everyone. And then I wrote the story, The Woman Who Slowly Disappeared, about women who felt like they were invisible and that the world wasn't seeing them anymore. And the reason why, because they were disappearing, is because they just felt like they weren't seeing themselves anywhere else in society, so therefore they were disappearing. And that was the book that just that story set off all the other stories. That every little thing that kind of bugged me, or I was able to turn into a surreal story that captured it in a better way than I could ever do it in a normal way.
Yes, because
that was a long answer. I apologize, but that's how it all came about.
Long after you apologized?
No, I'm saying that was a very long answer, and I apologize.
Oh no, not at all. I love that. I'd really love to. I love to tell people about the woman who was fed by a duck, and the woman who was kept on the shelf. When I describe the book, I bring up those two stories, and I'm just like, it's so weird. But so relatable. You have to watch it, and you have to read it to know.
The next story I wrote was the woman who found bite marks on her skin. And I found that was a very personal story, because I wrote that when I went back to work after having my second child.
Yes.
I remember dropping my eldest child to Montessori. She cried her eyes out at the door. I left my baby. He cried his eyes out. I sat in the car. I cried my eyes out, and I went to work. And I was like, "What am I doing? Like, I'm trying to. I have to work. That's life. But nobody's happy." And I just felt so bad about what I was doing that I spent my day writing a novel, and then at the very end of the day, at about 5 o'clock, because I put the time on it when I was writing, I wrote the story about a woman who was experiencing incredible guilt after going back to work after having a baby. She had bite marks all over her skin, and the guilt was eating her alive. And that was just exactly what I was experiencing. So that was very personal. And as you say, the woman who was kept on the shelf, they were all, you know, they're all, you know, they're all surreal and weird, but so real. You know, we all know what it's like to be left behind. You know, sometimes there are trophy wives, and sometimes if you get left there, you're going to gather dust, and you have to get off that shelf.
That, I have to say, the woman with bite marks on her skin, the woman who found bite marks on her skin, that story is also a top one for me on a very personal level, for all the similar reasons that motherhood is at once so unique to every individual, but also there's so much universality to it. And it has a special place in my heart and in my own writing experience as a journalist and as a creative. That story has, speaking about books that have changed your life, that when I'm doing my own work, that story has changed my life and the way that I see things in many different ways. So that's why I had to go there to Raw. And the fact that it was then adapted to TV, everybody needs to go and watch it and then get the book, because from there's so many more stories. And I found it quite interesting because...
Sorry, you like the duck story. I mean, it was amazing. I wasn't able to travel because it was during the pandemic and I couldn't get over to the set, so that was devastated. But I was seeing, excuse me, all the... they're sending me all the links, everything of, you know, the castings and everything. And my favorite thing there were two favorite things in that experience, and that was watching the set that they built for the woman who was kept on the shelf. Just seeing them make this stunning room with a huge shelf for her to be perched on. I can't believe this is coming alive. You know, I can't believe my weird brain is coming alive. And they also had to do a casting for a duck.
You did? You had to review the ducks?
Real duck.
I love that.
It's a real duck. So there was this amazing, there was a selection of ducks, I'm sure it wasn't just one, and a duck trainer, and they had all the markings on the floor, and the duck trainer would, you know, make her noise, and he'd just waddle along and he'd stop on his mark. And watching that for me, it was like, I can't believe that things from my head is actually coming alive now, and that people are spending money, and that there's a crew gathered, and that there's a duck trainer and a duck because I wrote the story. That was an amazing moment.
Oh, I can, like, of all the surreal things to have happened to you, you know, your first knockout sensational novel aside, yes, I would also say that would also have probably been one for the books, is to be casting a duck. Yeah. Cecelia, and I think it almost, for me, when I think about your career, it's almost full circle, because didn't you start out you wanted to do a postgraduate degree in film and television? You also did journalism in your undergrad years.
I did the degree in journalism and media communication. Yes. So, and then I was doing a master's in film production, and that's the world I wanted to get into. I really wanted to just be creative and tell stories and film, TV and film. And I left after 2 days. It was only the introduction days to write P.S. I Love You, and then kind of within months it was becoming a film anyway. So yeah, it is full circle. It's incredible. I wish I had more of a role on set though, because I wanted to do the actual making, you know.
Yes.
So when I go, I just visit, I feel like a spare part, but I would love to be able to, I just love watching the cameras and it's all the equipment. I just love that world. It makes me so excited and feel like a child.
Well, never say never, right? And I was today years old when I found out that you were the originator or the creator, or you were involved from the beginning of the show Samantha Who with Christina Applegate.
Yeah, it was
I
my show.
loved
Yeah,
that show. I loved
did
it.
you?
Yes.
That's great. I loved that show as well. It's myself and Donald Todd who created it. And it came from PS I Love You because the head of comedy development in ABC read PS I Love You and loved it and got in touch with me and asked if I would create something for TV for them. And she specifically wanted a half-hour comedy. And so I did. I created Samantha Who, and I went over and pitched it and met with writers, and it came to life. And that was an incredible experience.
I love that
So
show. I never missed an episode. It was
Oh,
it was my
and what a
jam.
cast! Like the cast, like Jean Smart,
Yes.
Melissa McCarthy.
Yes.
It's an amazing cast.
It's so great. And I mean, I really just think that your career is so fascinating to me, and your I suppose the trajectory of your time as a writer, and then I would argue that you're a filmmaker, and that you are just this creator and this visionary for our generation. I'm just fascinated by your process. I know that everything that you write, a book a year, which is also incredible, starts out on paper, the old-fashioned way, right?
That's right. Yeah, I write it first, and then well, I think it starts first. It starts in my head. I watch it in my head.
Okay.
I watch it in my head, and then I kind of play around, and then I'm listening to the dialogue, and it's like I'm watching a movie in my head or whatever, and then I write it down. It goes from pen to paper, and that's where it flows so naturally. And then I transcribe, and then as I transcribe, I edit as I go along, and and further develop it. But it's the easiest and most natural way for it to come out is just through old-fashioned pen.
So how persistent is that when you're watching this vision? How persistent is it? Because I feel like if I get an idea, and I'm normally in the shower, which is a really boring analogy, but it happens, and or anecdotes, and I have to rush out, dripping wet, and it's normally my phone that's on hand. So, but because it disappears so quickly, and there's something that I woke up in the middle of the night, and I found some kind of jobbled nonsense on my phone the next day that I still have to kind of decode. What's it like for you? How quickly does it disappear, or is it persistent? This image, this visual.
Well, it's exactly as you've described. I mean, that's pretty much my life as well. What you've just described. But sometimes it does disappear, doesn't it? And so everything goes into the notes on my phone, and then I put it into a notebook of ideas. So I do have a notebook of ideas. Sometimes it's just characters, sometimes it's just titles, sometimes it's a nugget of something, but nothing complete. But I keep it there because, as amazing as I think the idea is, it does disappear. It's like a fleeting thought, and then it goes. And usually it's something, you get that seed of the idea, and it develops into something else. But if you don't capture it, it can just go, if you, and I think the ideas that I usually end up writing as novels are the persistent ones. They're the ones that grow and grow and grow. They're like, the more characters come, and it can move in all different directions, as a story, that it can last the entirety of a book, of what a novel needs to be.
It's nagging. It's a nagging sensation.
It is, yeah. And then when I hear the voice of the character, it's like, what do they sound like? What's their tone? Are they sarcastic? Are they funny? Or they're very serious? What are they looking for? How do they sound? And as soon as I get that, then it's time to start writing.
I'm thinking about this Instagram post of yours. It's an image of a candle and a mug and a pen, and the caption reads something like "Let the writing begin." So is that your kind of setting your brain for the work day ahead? You light a candle. You've got your mug of I'm presuming tea or coffee.
Got my decaf tea.
Decaf.
I do like this candle. Not since the beginning, because I couldn't afford the candle prepared for the because it's Joe Malone.
I hear that.
Yeah, so it can be any candle, but it has been this lime and basil mandarin Joe Malone candle, and I was given a gift. I think my publishers gave it to me, and then I just loved the scent and kept lighting it. And I met Joe Malone, the candle maker.
You did?
We were on a TV show together, and And I totally fangirled her. I was like, oh my God, I light your candles when I'm writing. And she was like, which scent is it? She very specifically wanted to know. And I told her it was either this and another one, but mainly lime, basil, and mandarin. And she said, what you're doing is you're you're triggering your mind that it knows now that it's time to be creative. Because you've been doing it for so long, for almost 20 years, that as soon as you smell that scent, your mind goes, I know what to do. So I had this fascinating conversation with her about scent. And we all know, I suppose, the magic of it, how, one smell can take you back, time traveling back to childhood or to a moment in your life. And that seems to be, it's like a kind of a brain training, I think, now at this stage, that I smell that smell and I know it's time to, it's safe time. It's time to, explore.
To go there, to disappear.
Yeah, to go there.
Speaking about synaesthesia, that's quite apt for you as a writer, I think.
True, yeah. That's true, actually.
So, Cecelia, next on the horizon for you, and something that I'm really looking forward to, is a new title called Into the Storm. How much can you share? What is Into the Storm all about?
It's so new that I haven't really spoken about it yet. It's about a woman she's a GP in Ireland, and she's traveling on the roads one very stormy night and comes across a hit and run accident. And she gives him CPR at the scene and saves his life, but she is drawn into this investigation that really does kind of cause the unraveling of her life. And she moves away to a rural village to become this rural GP and kind of just reassess her life and try to put herself back together again after the events of this, of being involved in this hit and run where she saved the boy. And there is a rag tree in her garden. I don't know if you have them in South Africa, but in Ireland they're called rag trees, and they're basically trees with rags tied around the branches, and they would be in places that were considered holy, like if it's fed by the water of a holy well or near a church or something like that, it would be considered to have sacred healing powers. And so people go to these trees, and they come from all around the world sometimes as well on these pilgrimage tours, and tie fabric around the branches of the trees of the people that they love who might need healing. And it's thought that if you do that, it helps your loved one heal. So she's living on the grounds of this tree, and all kinds of people are coming towards the tree. And it's really about her learning and trying to cleanse herself and find a new way of being. And she's going through a storm.
into the storm. I love it.
Yeah,
because
storm.
Normally we would speak about after the storm, or the eye. So I suppose she's heading into the eye of the storm. I'm looking forward to it.
Like the book opens on this stormy night, so she is headed straight into that storm, and it has an impact on the rest of her life. And it's as you know, I like to go from dark to light, so I'm not going to let anyone down. But it's she's definitely. It gave me a bit of anxiety because she's just put herself in such a tough position, and needs to just put her life back together again.
And you start all of your novels, or at least the ones that I'm familiar with, they're right there at the pinnacle of, there isn't even like a slow lull and build up into the trauma. There's just the trauma. But
I just bang you land right in there with them. I just want to start them at the lowest point, because I just think the only way is up, the only way is up.
Well, I look forward to learning about how she journeys.
Her name is Enya Pickering, Dr. Enya Pickering.
I love it.
And she's a very different character for me. And she goes through. I want to say more, but no, she just
don't say more. Don't say more. I'm going to look forward to it. I'm going to enjoy it. I'm going to lap it up. And speaking of lapping up, you're going to be lapping up some wine soon, because you are South Africa bound for the Franschhoek List Fest.
I'm very excited. I've never been to South Africa. This is my first trip, and I think I'm going to the most beautiful, stunningly amazing place.
No doubt.
I can't wait.
No doubt. You will be chatting with Danielle Weekly over brunch, I believe. I'm very insanely jealous. If I were to put a color to the way I'm feeling now, it would be green. I am green.
Oh, I'm feeling green.
I'm feeling green with envy. Green. So it will be your first time. It is my favorite color too. Yay, because it's life as well. It's life, plants. Ugh.
Yeah.
Read in 1,000 different ways if you want inside my and Cecilia's inside jokes about colors. Enjoy South Africa, Cecelia Ahern, and thank you so much for a beautiful chat. I really look forward to speaking with you again once I've devoured Into the Storm. It's really been an absolute pleasure. Thank you for joining me.
Thank you. It's been so much fun, and I really appreciate it. Thank you.